Check
morning.
one.
Thank you.
Check, check 1 2. We're getting ready to go live, and we start our meetings promptly at 9 a.m. So,
Betsy, thank you for my little heart this morning.
Yes, Betsy, thank you from Jim as well. You've been lovely through the years. Happy Valentine's Day, dear.
You are very welcome.
Thank you.
okay, good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Today is February 14th, 2025, for the Eastern Shore delegation. Could we please rise for the saying of the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Delegate Otto, would you be willing to offer prayer this morning for us?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could we have an attitude of prayer, seek an attitude of prayer? And dear Heavenly Father, we ask you this day to bless this holiday season that celebrates love and relationships, and give us all strength to carry on the business of the citizens of the Eastern Shore. Thank you for providing the fellowship and good food last night at the Taste of the Eastern Shore, and for the participants that came. And may they appreciate the bounty that you have provided for us on the Eastern Shore. Give each of these members of the delegation strength to carry on through this challenging session, and may your blessings be known, and to you we give the glory. Amen.
You're on mute, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, could we get a motion and second on the meeting minutes from last week?
So move to approve.
Okay, thank you very much. This morning,
Back on mute, Mr. Chair.
sorry, I'm having a Friday here that feels like a Monday. This morning we have the Maryland Department of Transportation with us. It's going to be a group, and I see a couple of screens, so please introduce yourself, and the floor is yours. Good morning.
Well, good morning, Chair Adams and members of the Eastern Shore delegation. Thank you so much for having us with you this morning. I'm Samantha Biddle, Deputy Secretary of the Maryland Department of Transportation. And on behalf of Secretary Paul Wiedefeld, who's unfortunately battling the flu this week, we really just do thank you for this invitation and the opportunity to share updates with you on the projects we're working on that'll, benefit all of your constituents. So joining me this morning, State Highway Administrator Will Pines, Maryland Transportation Authority Executive Director Bruce Gartner, and Port of Baltimore Executive Director Jonathan Daniels. Will, Bruce, and Jonathan will discuss their projects, and we'll have time to answer all of your questions, but I just want to give a brief overview on the department's proposed budget and some other kind of key updates. So thanks to Governor Moore and his leadership, MDOT did present our balanced budget earlier this session, which fully funds and revives many projects across the state. These projects prioritize safety and reliability while driving economic growth statewide. This is a balanced plan, including the department's #1 priority, which is an additional $420 million in state transportation revenue annually. And this funding is critical to fully leverage all of our available federal funding. That's something that we were talking about a lot on last year's CTP tour. What this means is that, if approved, these additional revenues, $420 million, would then allow us to grow through bonding and matching to approximately $695 million in annual new resources to deliver projects and programs across the state. This also enables the department to meet our state of good repair investment levels, ensuring safe and reliable access for opportunity for more Marylanders. So this balanced plan includes maintaining operations across the department and advancing previously deferred priority projects. As one specifically of interest to many of you, will be being able to resume some of that important work on the Maryland 90 corridor at Ocean City. The additional revenue will also support the department's commitment to increase support for locally owned and operated transit systems or lots, such as Shore Transit and Delmarva Community Transit. Our final CTP includes support for the state's public use airports by providing $3 million annually starting in FY26 through our Regional Aviation Assistance Program. We have great partnerships and working relationships with so many of you on the shore on that. And the program provides funding for those projects that promote safety, security, and economic development at both the Easton Airport and the Salisbury Regional Airport. This year, the program expects to award 12 new projects at various airports across the state. We're really excited about that. Those local airports across the state are really economic engines for each of the communities. The MAA recent economic impact report found that the state's community airports do generate over 10,000 jobs and more than $1.1 billion in business revenue in direct support of local communities. The department also supports communities on the shore through various grant opportunities, such as the NBA, who recently awarded more than $13 million in federal highway safety grants to organizations across the state. Some of that funding went to organizations like police departments in Berlin, Easton, and Denton, as well as the Kent County Sheriff's Office. This is, important work that goes towards preventing crashes and eliminating fatalities, all towards those zero death goals that we all share. The NBA is currently accepting applications through February 28th. Just wanted to flag that for the next round of highway safety grants. And also our final CTP does also comply with the existing law regarding highway user revenues. I know that's always a hot topic amongst discussions with our county partners. This results in more than $2.3 billion in investments in local roads and bridges over the next 6 years. While we're hiding MDOT's projects, I do want to take a brief moment to discuss our progress on rebuilding the Francis Scott Key Bridge, something that we were able to make some significant progress on, especially last week. So just to be clear, the bridge is owned by MDTA, which is separate from MDOT's budget and the state's transportation trust fund. So when we're talking about, this year's budget, it does not include, the FSK, dollars. MDTA, as you all know, is funded by the tolls that it collects. And as I referenced last week, the governor did unveil the new design for the Key Bridge. And last month, pre-construction activities began. So it's a lot of really good progress. So, the entire department is really grateful to Maryland's federal delegation for getting Congress to pass that, authorization to rebuild the bridge with 100% funding. The state does continue to pursue the Dali's owner and manager for all of the damages caused by their negligence and incompetence, including the cost to reconstruct the Key Bridge, so that the parties responsible for this tragedy pay for the damages that were caused. The American Relief Act of 2025 provides that if any additional funds are required to build the new bridge beyond compensation paid by the Dali, the federal government will provide that funding. And DTA is working on an accelerated timeline to rebuild the bridge and plans to have it open as soon as possible. And I'm sure Bruce can provide more updates there. And so, just in closing, we want to thank the General Assembly for its support last session in passing more than $250 million in additional transportation revenues. That'll, continue to index up. The additional revenue passed last session allows, the department to restore many impactful reductions. But with those restorations, we do still have critical needs, and the additional funding we're seeking this year will assist in addressing those growing needs. The additional revenues proposed in this year's budget, as I referenced, are really going to help us make progress on those critical safety and maintenance projects, all with an eye to leverage fully those federal funds and support inclusive economic growth. So in closing, we're eager to work with the Eastern Shore Delegation and the General Assembly, to advance our budget. The budget before you is contingent on additional revenues being available to fund all of those projects that we'll talk about today. And given other changes that have occurred since the draft CTP, we just want to flag, that we're closely monitoring, all of the shifts with these projects. And sorry, thought I heard someone coming in there.
That said it.
But just wanted to flag that, these funds will support a variety of, crucial efforts across the state. Sorry, my computer is glitching a little bit here. I'm not sure if you can still hear me. But with that, I will turn it over to Executive Director Daniels for an update on the Maryland Port Administration.
Deputy Secretary, we did hear you and thank you for the update.
Apologies for any issues at the end there.
None whatsoever.
All right, my screen just started flashing as if I was in a strobe light situation. So I'm glad that didn't transmit to y'all. So thanks so much.
Secretary Biddle, thank you. Chair Adams and members of the delegation, certainly good morning. Happy Valentine's Day to all of you that are celebrating today. And it certainly is my pleasure to be here with you briefly this morning. For the record, my name is Jonathan Daniels, and I currently serve as the Executive Director of the Maryland Port Administration in the Port of Baltimore. Pleased to be here with my team, a few members I have, and you're going to have the opportunity to hear from some of them a little bit later on the state of the port and our critical ecosystem restoration projects in the Chesapeake Bay. Maryland's port has continued to play an integral role in maintaining our nation's supply chain. While the port's overall volumes would have been higher if not for the elision and the Key Bridge collapse, we continue to make progress on our recovery. And even though we were a port that was only open for 9 out of 12 months last year, the tonnage that came through and across the entire Port of Baltimore docks put us in a number 2 position. With the amount of tonnage only followed by the record totals in 2023. Despite a challenging year, the port has made very significant achievements. In March of 2024, we released our new economic impact numbers showing 273,000 jobs in Maryland are linked to the Port of Baltimore. In October, the port officially began double-stack container rail operations with CSX at Seagirt Marine Terminal on a temporary route into the Midwest until the Howard Street Tunnel project is completed. That project continues to move forward with an anticipated completion date in 2026. It will increase the port's business by 160,000 containers annually and generate nearly 14,000 jobs, both in the construction and future jobs due to the increased business. Double stacking also puts us on a more favorable and level playing field with our competitor ports. For the 16th consecutive year, MPA's terminals received a rating of excellent on a security assessment from the U.S. Coast Guard, further proof that the Port of Baltimore is not only one of the most productive and busiest ports in the United States, but also one of the most secure. So I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to be here with you briefly this morning. At this point, I'm going to hand it over to MPA's Director of Navigation, Innovation, and Stewardship, Holly Miller, to talk about our key projects in Talbot and Dorchester counties. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good morning. I'm, like Jonathan said, I'm Holly Miller. I'm the Director of the MPA's Office of Navigation, Innovation, and Stewardship. As the largest creator of wetlands in the state of Maryland, the Maryland Port Administration remains committed to prioritizing these efforts as our aquatic ecosystem restoration projects on the Eastern Shore move forward. To date, the MPA has restored 970 acres of wetland and wildlife habitat throughout the state through our internationally renowned dredging program. So first I wanted to start with Poplar Island update. Poplar is located in Talbot County and it's a highly successful example of the beneficial use of dredge material. This project is a collaborative project between the MPA and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and it serves as the main recipient of the material that's removed from the Maryland Bay channels since 2001, and it will continue to receive material until about 2032. The final project, including the expansion, will contain about 68 million cubic yards of material, resulting in a total of about 1,715 acres of restored remote island habitat when it's fully restored. To date, over 400 acres of wetlands have been restored on Poplar Island. Planning for the development of the upland portion of the project is currently underway, and the project team is considering the most desirable habitats for that area of the island, which could include things like shrub and scrub habitat, forest, freshwater wetlands, as well as meadow habitats. The 2025 tour season is upon us. Poplar offers tours from March through October, and you can schedule those. Poplar Island tours host a variety of people, including school groups, the general public, birding groups, and any sort of special interest tours. In total, there were about 2,479 visitors to Poplar Island in 2024, and our outreach staff was able to engage with a total of 4,935 individuals through a variety of different opportunities. Highlights of those engagements included attending Bay Day, Tillman Island Day, the Waterfowl Festival, as well as Tillman Area Youth Association after-school programming. Like Poplar Island, the Mid-Bay Islands project located in Dorchester County will focus on restoring remote island habitat through the beneficial use of dredged material. This project is also a partnership project between the Maryland Port Administration and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Placement of dredged material will occur on both Barren and James Island to recreate wetlands and upland habitats. The Mid-Bay project is needed as Poplar Island nears its final capacity, which we're anticipating to start around 2030. Once Poplar Island reaches its ultimate capacity, Mid-Bay will be ready to must be ready to accommodate the sediments that are dredged annually from the Maryland Bay channels, while also restoring 2,144 acres of remote island habitat. Phase 1 of Barren Island, which included the installation of protective stone sills and breakwaters, was completed in October of last year. Phase 2 of Barren Island began last month, and it will continue with additional sill work, bird island installation, as well as containment structures that will be used for the placement of dredged material from the maintenance dredging of the Hunga River. Hunga River dredging is expected to occur in about 2026. Lastly, design efforts for the James Island portion of the project continue, and we're expecting that will be completed this fall. The project team continues to engage with stakeholders regularly on the Mid-Bay project by hosting annual community meetings, sending out biannual newsletters, routinely meeting with stakeholders on a one-on-one basis to answer questions, and participating in local events such as the Juneteenth event in Cambridge. We will continue to keep communities and interested stakeholders engaged and informed as the project progresses. And with that, I just greatly appreciate your time this morning, and we really look forward to partnering with you as we continue to work hard to closely align our mission to increase waterborne commerce through the ports in Maryland with stewardship of Maryland's natural resources and its citizens. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Okay, are there any more presentations by MDOT? We normally just let the presentation go and then we'll ask members questions at the end.
Yes, we do have some additional presentations, so we'll hand it over to the next mode. Thank you.
Sure.
Good morning, all. I'm Bruce Gartner, Executive Director of the MBTA. I just am here to give a few updates on our projects that are underway, particularly the Bay Bridge, some in Cecil County, at the Hatem and on I-95. So just wanted to start off by expressing my exterior gratitude to everyone who has supported the MBTA through a very difficult year and challenging year, particularly my colleagues on this call here with the Deputy Secretary, the Port Executive Director, and Will Pines at SHA. So with the design unveil that we had last week that the Deputy Secretary mentioned and the pre-construction activities, we've had a lot of activity. We have a many challenges to come in the future, and we're anxious to get underway. Those pre-construction activities happening out there in the river now have been good for everybody to understand what the magnitude of the project is, and I encourage everyone to visit our website at keybridgerebuild.com to look at all the information that we're providing there. It's a significant outreach effort that we're undertaking with not only the communities affected by the bridge, but the industry that's going to help us build the bridge. So moving to the Bay Bridge, several projects going on there that I updated all of the delegations on in the counties during the CTP tour. Last fall, we were talking about the redecking project at the Bay Bridge. I believe we were about 40 panels in there. We are up to 91 panels out of the 156, so we're nearing 60% of that work, and it is expected to be completed this summer. As you may recall, as part of that, we are working on a Maryland Artificial Reef Initiative, which we use recycled deck panels that are placed at the Hackett Point Artificial Reef southwest of the bridge. So that's been a great partnership opportunity. We're looking forward to continuing that in a phase 2 environment. We've had some suggestions about other locations that we'll be exploring in phase 2 of the project. The other major project that we've had activity on in the past several months since the CTP tour was the Bay Crossing study, determining what the future Bay Crossing might look like. We had 2 open houses, in-person open houses, and 1 virtual open house in December. And between November and January 13th, during the survey period, we had a survey online through the Bay Crossing website. As a result, we had over 1,000 responses that were received, and those will be made public very soon. We anticipate completing the Tier 2 study by the end of 2026, but we will be back out to the public near the end of 2025 and providing updates on that in the coming year. During the meetings last fall, we had a couple requests that we look into regarding the Bay Bridge and the flow of traffic and information, particularly when we have those emergency or unexpected closures of one of the bridges where we really impact commutes and traffic. So we are working with both Queen Anne's County and Anne Arundel County, with Queen Anne's, particularly with the group that works on Everbridge and leveraging some real-time text alerts that could benefit the commuters looking to have even more real-time information in addition to our emails and our social media postings. As a reminder there, we do have that real-time traffic information available by calling 1-877-BASEBAN. Really good updates on that when you need them. The other topic at the Bay Bridge that we've been looking into and made some progress on is the red X signage. We had requests from the delegation to provide more signage on the fines that are there. We have recently installed ground-mounted signs on the shoulder with the fines noted for violating the red X lane, and we have overhead signs that are being examined that will be installed around June of this year. So that is the Bay Bridge update on active projects, and I turn to the Belvedere Interchange. As you all know, that's a Cecil County project that will provide more direct access to and from I-95 for trucks accessing the Cecil County Enterprise Zone, reducing truck volumes on US 40, Maryland 22, and Maryland 272. Construction activities began in early 24, and they're still expected to continue through FY 26. We do have automated speed enforcement on I-95 in both directions that began in the summer and is currently active. During construction, Belvedere Road within the vicinity of the bridge will be reduced to 1 lane. That new traffic pattern went into effect last May and is expected to be in effect until early summer. A short-term complete closure of Belvedere Road will be in place for up to 3 months starting the spring of this year. This closure is for the installation of New York Building Products infrastructure and will be coordinated with Cecil County. Lastly, on the Hayden Bridge, we are in the midst of the painting project there. That the project does require peak and off-peak temporary lane closures on the bridge to accommodate construction equipment and provide safe conditions for workers. 1 lane will remain open in each direction throughout the duration of that project, and it is anticipated to be complete in the spring of 2026. That's my remarks, and I can turn it over to Administrator Will Pines from the State Highway Administration and be available for questions afterwards.
All right. Well, thank you, Bruce, and good morning, Chair and members of the Eastern Shore Delegation. For the record, I'm Will Pines, State Highway Administrator. And as an Eastern Shore native myself, I'm grateful for the opportunity to serve along the great SHA team who are working hard to contribute to the vitality of the shore. Going back to my early years working on local farms, I'm proud that we had the opportunity to sponsor House Bill 225 and Senate Bill 203 this session. This bill will streamline the statewide hauling permit process for agricultural field products, consolidating the cumbersome process of 4 separate permits into a single permit for those agricultural products. And we are really encouraged that we've gotten strong support for this bill, including from the Maryland Motor Trucker Association, Royal Maryland Council, the Maryland Milk Producers, Maryland Grain Producers Association, the Delmarva Chicken Association, the Association of Forest Industries, and the Maryland Department of Agriculture. So a lot of support behind this bill that we know will help out farmers on the shore and statewide. I committed during our prior meetings with you that I would advance SHA's organizational efficiency, and this is an important example to that end. But as many of you know, much of the credit for our partnership is to our 2 district engineers on the Eastern Shore, Mark Crampton in District 1 and Ken Fender in District 2. Sorry, I'm hearing some echo there. I know because many of you tell me about the great work that you experience with our district engineers, that you can pick up the phone and call Mark and Kenny whenever you need something. And I just really appreciate their service to you. We strive to maintain proactive, responsive partnerships and connections with the communities and elected leaders that we serve. In that spirit of engagement, it seems like just yesterday I was presenting details about the draft CTP to you and your colleagues in the county, and we've seen some changes since then. So I'm pleased to brief you on some of the projects and initiatives that you and your constituents greatly care about. We tackled things like fixing a drainage issue on Northwestern Elementary School and replacing the underground pipe at Maryland 346. To big things like partnering on the US 50 ramp management program on Kent Island. We're working with the county again this summer to provide continued support in helping with traffic management. And we're closing a section of Maryland 662 to support construction of the new University of Maryland Shore Regional Medical Center. We were proud of these partnerships and the work that we do on the shore. As I said in the fall, SHA is committed to doing big things that improve safety and promote economic development in your communities. Safety remains our #1 priority for the sake of our customers and for the men and women who build and maintain our roads. Thanks to the vision and commitment of Governor Moore, our final CTP presented to the General Assembly includes additional funding, which we will use wisely and efficiently to unlock more federal dollars and get even more done, as the Deputy Secretary mentioned earlier. This investment will allow us to advance critical projects to make our roads safer and give a boost to Maryland's economy and its workforce. For example, we know how important it is to address the backlog of paving needs on the Eastern Shore, especially on those routes that are federally ineligible. In FY24, we completed 216 lane miles of resurfacing and 147 lane miles of preventative maintenance for pavement on the shore in districts 1 and 2. Additionally, the governor's budget proposal includes $82 million of additional state dollars in the final CTP for resurfacing, which is above the amount that was in the draft CTP that we presented last fall. The total resurfacing increase is $143 million in federal funds. That includes those federal funds added to it. And we'll be working with our federal partners to increase the federal dollars applied to resurfacing while also focusing on some of the poorest condition roads on the Eastern Shore, which we know that are actually not federally eligible. Additionally, moving on to some major projects. One of the key major projects that will advance with this additional funding is Maryland 90, the Ocean City Expressway from US 50 to Maryland 528. As you know, Maryland 90 provides crucial access to and from Ocean City. In 2023, we completed our planning and environmental linkages study for this project, which included good interaction with the community and local officials. The study identified long-term needs related to traffic operations, capacity, safety, and pedestrian and bicyclist accessibility. And the draft CTP had Maryland 90 project on hold, but the governor's additional allocation will help us continue moving through the design and NEPA process. We know the importance of this project, and we couldn't be happier that the governor has put us back on track. We're also looking forward to a spring completion on the $12.8 million replacement of US 301 bridge over Chester River. The original bridge is 70 years old and was rated poor. This directly impacts Kent and Queen Anne's counties, but it's one of those projects that really we know affects the entire region. The new span will have wider shoulders, better approaches, and improved stormwater management. And we also are continuing the $16.7 million project to replace US 13 Business Bridge over the Wicomico River in Salisbury. We're looking at a completion in 2026 for this project. The bridge was built in 1937 and the new span will have improved pedestrian facilities with a shared hiker-biker path on the east side and ADA compliant sidewalks on both sides. Additionally, we're continuing work on pavement widening and signal upgrades for a dedicated left turn lane from Maryland 328 to Maryland 404 in Caroline County. We anticipate that that project will be completed by the end of the year. And we've completed the study for the US 50 bridge over Sinnapuxent Bay and are advancing important repairs and rehabilitation that's anticipated to be done this spring. We're also advancing Somerset County's #1 priority with the construction this year on a segment of Maryland 413 Trail. Engineering for future phases is underway, and this is a paved bike and pedestrian trail with parking areas and plantings. When it's done, it will complete the 12-mile shared use path between Chrisfield and Westover, supporting tourism and economic development. It's one of several multimodal projects we have in the works on the Eastern Shore. We also just held the public workshop last month in Ocean City for the Maryland 522 Pedestrian Safety Maryland 528 Pedestrian Safety Action Plan project, which will make the area from 15th Street to 67th Street safer for walkers, cyclists, and motorists. This project and our Pedestrian Safety Action Plan projects are critical to achieving Vision Zero in Maryland. For example, Maryland 528, there in Ocean City, has 5 times more vulnerable road user fatalities per mile than the statewide average. I'll say again, 5 times more dangerous road there in Ocean City than the statewide average. This is a dangerous road to non-motorists, and we must do more to address preventable crashes on Maryland roads. We started design last year, and with the feedback we received at the workshop, we'll continue to work on preliminary design. This project complements the terrific partnership that we've had with Ocean City for several years through our Cheswick the Crab campaign. We've made a difference in keeping people safe while enjoying the Eastern Shore, and we want to do more. We're also studying the Maryland 12 Snow Hill Road from Sandy Acres Drive to East Main Street in Salisbury to determine ways we can enhance safety and mobility there for pedestrians, bicyclists, and vulnerable road users. The review began in October and is anticipated to be completed this spring. We have $139,000 for preliminary planning to develop recommendations. These projects are part of our aggressive approach to make Maryland roadways safer for all users, and including on the Eastern Shore. And in 2024, on kind of more the maintenance side of the house, we upgraded 1,009 crosswalks at 462 intersections across the state, including 340 crosswalks on the Eastern Shore. We are continuing this crosswalk initiative in 2025 to focus on safety. And as you know, we also improved many intersections and signals to make traffic movement safer. Once again, I want to thank you for all the partnership that you've shown in the past on these projects and so much more. And I look forward that we can accomplish so much more together in the future to improve the lives of our customers and our neighbors. And with that, I want to thank you. And I think I'm the last presenter here at MDOT, so the MDOT team would be happy to take any questions related to any of our presentations.
Last but not least, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Deputy Secretary Beidle, thank you and your team for presenting to us today. We do truly appreciate the partnership that we as local electeds have with the state and your department. We have some questions from Delegate Hartman. We'll start there. Delegate Jacobs.
Oh, here we go. There we go. Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to thank the entire team of Maryland Transportation for their presentations this morning. They always do a thorough presentation, and I do have a couple questions. I do also want to thank you for your support of HB 225, which you brought up earlier, which will certainly help the shore and all elements of agriculture, etc. Will, on the Chester River Bridge replacement, you were talking so fast, I didn't catch the date of when you thought you would be into that project.
They get off mute here. Can you get, yeah, okay, I'm good. So we are expecting a spring completion for that project.
Spring of what year?
This coming year, sorry.
Really?
That's my understanding. Oh, no, I'm so, yes, that's right. Yep,
Of the Chester River Bridge?
that's what I'm told.
So are you replacing the all the pilings underneath, or is this going to be a redecking?
That was the scope of the project is the full replacement.
All right. So and the other question I have, we've had a tough winter with all the freezing weather and it's really the highways and state roads have quite a few potholes on them. And I know that there's a lot of money's been spent on overtime, keeping everything clear. They've done a good job of that. So we're all concerned about the spending as you know, with the fall CTP and the amount of money that was going to be spent in the restoration efforts, which are real important to us. So you didn't mention the purple line, and I know that it's sucking the air out of the room financially, and it's what I understand about $4 billion over budget, and I think I heard it was 72% complete. Is that correct?
Those are consistent with the numbers that I've seen as well, Delegate. Yes, as far as percent complete.
72% right now. Okay. Because I know that there's a lot of money going in that direction that's pulling from every other project, and I really appreciate all the projects that Will mentioned this morning, but we're also concerned with how far that's going with it as it nears the end of its project completion.
No, and I'll take a brief moment to say that, we hear you loud and clear, and we hear those concerns from, members of the General Assembly in the jurisdictions where the Purple Line is being built, as well as throughout the state. And the team at MTA, as well as the team at the Secretary's office, are working diligently to continue to work on cost containment measures with the P3 partner there, and really just making sure that as we advance through the final phases of construction and into operations and testing, that we are, keeping a very close eye on that and not allowing, the budget to grow further.
All right. Thank you. I'll leave it at that, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Delegate Hartman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation this morning. The questions are for Will Pines. Two questions. One regarding Coastal Highway, the project from 15th to 67th Street. So can you tell us what that's looking like so far? Any indication? Does that mean that median fence may come down further? Help me understand what that project entails.
So right now, we just had the public engagement meetings to kind of scope out what the core types of needs are for those areas. We would be looking for a toolkit of solutions to help improve safety. So for example, Federal Highway publishes what they call the proven safety countermeasures. This includes things like leading pedestrian intervals at our signals that allows for pedestrians to actually enter the crosswalk a little earlier. When pedestrians are able to make eye contact with the motorist, the likelihood of them having a negative conflict greatly decreases. Speed adjustments through the corridor would be another consideration. As speeds are reduced, the risk of death is lessened greatly. Somebody traveling at 40 miles an hour has an 85% chance of fatality versus at 20 miles an hour, that drops down to 10 to 15%. So if you can pull speeds down, those are some of the types of examples of proven safety countermeasures that we would be considering through the corridor. But certainly the median fencing that is in areas like the Convention Center has proven to be effective to prevent mid-block crossings at unplanned locations. We might consider some other more advanced technologies for crossings like pedestrian hybrid beacons, which would essentially add in additional signals that are dedicated for pedestrians. Those tend to be more impactful in terms of right-of-way, utilities, and just overall expense. So we're trying to look at the full set of crash data, fatality records, and public input to come up with a collection of safety countermeasures for that corridor that will really hit those hotspot areas and help to pull down the fatality numbers. We have seen. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, when did you expect to have the final report?
So the outreach, I don't have, I'm sorry, I can look it up here in a moment. If you give me a minute, I can, I don't have the full schedule for 528 right in front of me for the overall project plan. That's in our second cohort of pedestrian safety action plan projects. The first cohort includes 5 other corridors that are spread throughout the state. Right now, we're basically in the planning phase for that second cohort, which includes 528. So realistically, anything happening in terms of construction would be closer to the back end of the CTP.
Okay, and lastly, Route 90, that would entail federal funding, correct? If we once we get to the major part of replacing that stretch of highway or whatever.
Correct. And that's why we're actively working through the NEPA process. In order to unlock those federal funds, you really have to follow the entire federal process to be able to get up to the point where you can make the project eligible for federal money. So those are the steps we're going through now and planning with NEPA so that we can get a preferred alternative that we could pursue design on and then get to the full federal funding.
So with that said, what's the likelihood of bike and pedestrian path being in that Route 90 and, you know, what the final product looks like?
I mean, as part of, I'll say globally, as part of our complete streets policy, it is the department's position that we want to try to promote all modes of transportation. And certainly we know that there's a strong interest to create a destination point in Ocean City. But I part of inherent to NEPA, we can't predispose the outcomes. That's really a public engagement process. So I wouldn't want to say today exactly what that outcome may be, but it is the department's position that we support multimodal transportation. And so that will definitely be part of the discussions as we advance the project.
Okay, I appreciate the consideration and the emphasis on that. Because so many people live in the Ocean Pines community on the other side, and I think it's just with e-bikes and everything else progressing, I just think it's we only have one shot to do this right. I heard if federal funding was tied to it, it almost ensured that bike and pedestrian, but from the conversation we just had, that doesn't sound like necessarily a guarantee then, correct?
I think per our complete streets policy, it is highly likely that would be. But again, I just as an official policy standpoint,
I appreciate.
I got to let the NEPA process work itself.
Absolutely,
that's all.
I appreciate the answers. Thank you.
Okay, 2 final questions. Delegate Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. These are questions about the proposed budget and the CTP. Looks like the CTP is definitely higher than what it was in the fall. And it looks like out of all of the different agencies at MDOT, they all got an increase except for State Highway. Between MTA and WMATA, they got almost $1 billion increase over last year. State aid, 182 million. The Port Authority got 345 million more than last year. Aviation Administration got 132 million more than last year. The one that jumps out at me, it's a smaller number, but the Secretary's office got $49 million more. I'm really curious about what's going on at the Secretary's office. That's a big jump of $50 million at a Secretary's office. And then MVA is 22 million. Now we're looking at State Highway, $575 million cut. That's a very significant cut. What does that actually mean to, system preservation specifically, and also projects in regards to roads and bridges? Because it looks like this is a major shift in priorities in the governor's office. I mean, this is sending a pretty strong statement, it looks like.
Sure. So I think you have to look at things based on both, the budget year as well as looking across the 6-year program. There's certain things that we're able to accomplish in the short term versus what we're looking at accomplishing as we look at, bringing on additional revenues online and looking out into the future years of the program. There are some, near-term needs on the state of good repair and system criticality side of things on the transit side that we just simply cannot look past and defer any further at this point, specifically on our light rail system. We were fortunate to receive a discretionary grant on the current light rail system to address the vehicles there, but there is a lot of work that needs to be done to completely rebuild the rest of that system, including tracks and stations. And so that is a large investment and one that we feel is very important to the vitality of that system from a state of good repair perspective. We do also have, the legislation in place regarding state of good repair levels at MTA for those core transit services. So our budget reflects bringing those levels up to speed there. I'll have to double check on the specific numbers that you cited, but we did work really closely with all of the modes to be able to make investments and reinvestments in a lot of the core areas that we talked about today. So Will may be able to speak more in detail about some of the specific system preservation fund levels that he is kind of prioritizing with the additional funding available. But the state revenues that were allocated to state highways specifically have the opportunity to then be matched on the federal side to go a lot further. In some cases as much as 90-10 or 95-5 if we're able to additionally leverage toll credits. So I think that we are able to stretch a single transportation trust fund dollar a lot further on the state highway side when it comes to how we work with our federal partners in all of those things like the paving, the drainage, and all the important projects that happen. So I don't know, Will, if there's any specific fund categories that you would want to highlight, but I do feel like we are always going to have unfunded needs. We are always going to, do our best to prioritize the available funding and take care of the most critical of those needs. But we do keep an eye on, our state of good repair targets and the overall performance of our system. And we'll always be looking to, add funding where we feel that it best suits needs from an asset management and safety approach.
Well, there are some more bills that'll send more money specifically to WMATA. That's above and beyond what the governor's bill. But if you guys could let us know what the impact specifically that $575 million cut to state highway is going to be, because this is very concerning. I know that in the 4 counties that I represent, we made it very, very clear that our top priority when it comes to MDOT to Secretary Whitefeld was to ensure that we were going to be able to maintain our roads and bridges. And the first budget that comes out after those meetings, we're seeing almost a $600 million cut to roads and bridges, while we're also seeing over $1 billion increase to WMATA and MTA specifically. I mean, that's a huge increase. I mean, I'm looking at an increase of almost $1 billion, $985 million to WMATA. I'm sorry, to MTA. And so, I mean, I'm hoping that this isn't a trend. I'm hoping that this isn't, moving forward, that we're not going to see this year in and year out where we're going to make cuts to, the rural parts of the state while we're going to continue to not just fund. I mean, this is bloated at this point. $1 billion increase to transit in 1 year. That's insane, to be quite honest. While we're having more than $500 million cut to roads and bridges. At some point, I mean, we're going to have to start taking this personally, because it's a clear message this year. I just hope it doesn't happen again next year. So I hope that you guys can certainly deliver that message to the secretary. Thank you.
If I could, I would add just 2 points. One is that when the funds were added for the system preservation program, they were largely added as state dollars only without the corresponding federal matching funds. The reason for that is that we have to work through the process with our federal partners to confirm the amount of federal dollars. And we're still tooling specifically the asset allocations. Delegate Grist, I know you and I have talked a couple of times about paving on the Eastern Shore, and that those federally ineligible routes are a big challenge. And so, we get so much in terms of state dollars, and we've got to decide, do we take that money, amplify it with the federal funds, and get more paving done statewide, or cut money out of that smaller bucket and go do these routes that are otherwise federally ineligible. So we're having a lot of discussions with our team about that issue specifically, and that will affect the split of federal dollars. We do expect that we're going to be adding federal money into the CTP to tie to those system preservation projects. So that's one piece. And if you could just bear with me for one more second, and then I'll let you go here. The second piece is that if, as the deputy secretary mentioned, the 6-year CTP overall in terms of state dollars shows an increase to state highway for system preservation over the draft CTP. That 6-year, it does have challenges in FY 26 and 27, because if you look at the formula for HUR, those years have the highest amount of pressure on the TTF associated with the formula as that lays out. So TTF is kind of like, we all understand that the Transportation Trust Fund has a certain pot, and the HUR formula directly is tied to that as well. And so you can I just want to echo what the Deputy Secretary is saying, that the outlook in the future improves as the formula with HUR also helps to mitigate some of the cash flow impacts.
Well, my response to that is, at the end of the day, we have to resurface our roads every 10 years. Whether they're federal road highways or they're state highways, it doesn't matter for me, as long as they get paved. And I'm just concerned, and where our limited pot of money is going, it's leaning a lot much higher to transit than it is our roads. And I'm concerned that we're not going to be able to resurface these roads every 10 years. And I see it coming. And as you know, we're going to start seeing deterioration in these roads in a matter of 4, 5, 6 years. And who's going to get these calls? I can tell you, it's not going to be you guys. You guys aren't going to get the calls. It's going to be our offices, and our response is going to be, well, we've been telling the secretary for years that this is our priority, and they chose to fund transit instead of roads. So, but I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, last question, Senator Crozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the MDOT team. And I want to associate my comments with both Delegate Grice and Delegate Hartman. Being a former member of the House Appropriations Committee, I can attest that budgets reflect priorities. So the very serious questions that Delegate Grice just raised, we do want those elevated. As far as the comments made about Route 90 and Coastal Highway, we need to always keep safety as our top priority. And Administrator Pines, I know that you have made that a focus. We, of course, were really very glad to see the Route 90 study money restored to keep that on track. My question there on the Route 90 is, I think anytime we also talk about Route 90, we should also be talking about the impact on 589, where, we are seeing continued growth along that corridor. Ocean Pines, the various health and medical businesses along there. So any comment on safety, 589 tied to Route 90, I think we always should address that together. And second of all, on Coastal Highway in Ocean City, the Maryland bike folks were up earlier this week meeting with us and focusing on those safety issues. And I was glad to see that Officer Cutts from the Ocean City Police Department was part of that, to have that safety focus. I specifically wanted just to ask you, we talked in some detail about the area around 24th, 23rd to 25th Street. There's some real challenges there and confusion. And I think, I think the officer Cutts was taking that back to OCPD as well, maybe something even as simple as some signage, or but that really presents some pedestrian, bicyclist issues in that area. So I just wanted to make sure that we all stay coordinated, since SHA was not in that meeting, but we were talking about those safety issues, that we all stay coordinated so we can move forward on those safety projects.
No, first of all, Senator, I want to thank you, before I even get into your questions, thank you for your recent participation in one of our Adopt the Highway projects. We revamped that program and appreciate your collaboration with some of the partner members on that. It's really important issue for us as well. On the safety topics, on Maryland 528, the 23rd to 25th Street, I'll have my team follow up with you, with your staff, to get a little bit more details there, and also collaborate with any other stakeholders you feel like would really be appropriate to kind of have more engagement on. That sounds excellent. Certainly, we know we've heard the commissioners loud and clear. Maryland 589 is a big priority. We will work to see what we can do. Right now within the CTP, there is a PIF for complete streets projects, and we are actively evaluating statewide priorities with complete streets to identify opportunities for potential safety improvements for vulnerable road users throughout that corridor. We also know that congestion is a big issue on 589, and that there's an interest in doing some studies. We did work with the county to provide them some information that they requested to have sort of in their planning process, the right-of-way dedicated to help make that process run smoothly for the project to move forward. We look to them and hope to see that kind of action move forward to help us as we would look to do that project in the future.
And I thank you for that. And on your comment on Coastal Highway, when you mentioned there are business operators that have made some suggestions as well, and obviously they would be involved in that any of those conversations. And I really appreciate your follow-up with them as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Members, thank you very much for the questions. I do want to say to the Port Administration, Port Authority, thank you for the outreach on the Mid-Bay projects. As you know, in years past, we've talked about that, and that's not lost in the conversation. Furthermore, Delegate Aaronson and I look like we're going to be passing House Bill 575, which is going to, by request of the Attorney General, report to the General Assembly about the Dally lawsuit, and which I think is very important. But I also think it also reflects ultimately the importance of the port, and that we make our citizens whole under the circumstances. And I just want to close by saying thank you to the administration, the Port Administration, for the good work you do. You're a true economic driver, and
thank you.
It's hard to believe it was a year ago that happened, and the fact that we have moved in a direction that happened so swiftly and so positively for the state speaks to your leadership, and we thank you for that on behalf of the Eastern Shore delegation.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, members, we're going to move on to
Mr. Chair. I'm sorry. I had a quick question for you. I'm trying to multitask.
Okay, we're gonna have to be brief because we've got a couple secretaries.
That's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
All I would like to ask from Department of Transportation, there was a piece of legislation we had on the floor yesterday about allowing cyclists to have the stop signs now used as yield signs. If you could, and you don't certainly have to answer the question now, but I would like to know, how are you as an agency going to work with law enforcement to ensure that it does not become a hazardous issue for citizens who are riding their bikes? And then now the new practice will be that stop signs are now going to be yield signs. So I know we're in the issue of time right now, but I just asked if you could assist in that process.
Happy to follow up with you, Delegate.
Thank you kindly.
So, sorry, Delegate Sample Hughes, I didn't see your hand.
No, I just put it up at the last moment. Thank you very much.
All right. Okay, thank you very much. Next up, we have our good friend, Secretary Jake Day with DHCD. Good morning. Thank you for your patience. MDOT always brings questions, and thank you for your patience while we got through those.
Mr. Chair, good morning. Good to be with you. It's my pleasure. I got to hear MDOT's presentation too. I think it's great. They're doing lots of important work around the state, much of which connects to what we're trying to do with the Department of Housing and Community Development. So thanks for having me here today. I'm always happy to update the people that represent the Eastern Shore of Maryland. Before I speak about some of the key pieces of legislation that we are working on, I'd like to just take a quick second to recap the economic impact that DHCD has been able to provide to Maryland in 2024. The Moore-Miller administration is guided by a clear principle to create an economy that grows the middle class and gives everyone the chance to reach the next rung on the economic ladder. And we fit into that principle by serving as Maryland's housing and place-based economic development agency. And that's a term that we use to help try to describe what we mean when we say community development. It's not just community facilities, but it's place-based revitalization and economic growth work. We invest both state and federal dollars, as well as a significant amount of generated revenue from our businesses into communities through housing development, neighborhood revitalization, broadband deployment, and more. A new addition I'd like to highlight for this discussion is the creation of the Maryland Community Investment Corporation, which was established by the Housing and Community Development Financing Act, passed last year by the General Assembly, and which Governor Moore signed into law. The MCIC was recently certified the last few weeks as a community development entity by U.S. Treasury, meaning it can now tap into millions of dollars. The average award, by the way, is $50 million. That's the average in federal new market tax credit dollars. Those dollars incentivize private investment in communities across the country. And since its 2021 inception, New Market Tax Credit Program has awarded $71 billion in tax credits to stimulate private development. That has resulted in 938,000 jobs in America. For every dollar invested by the federal government, the NMTC program generates more than $8 in private investment. This is going to be a game changer in Maryland. The MCIC is geographically bound to only invest in Maryland. So we have other we have other CDEs in the state. This will be the first that is not only resident to Maryland, but is limited to investing in Maryland. Overall, DHCD's message remains the same. We are going to be focused on growing our economy. And we believe fundamental to that is addressing Maryland's housing shortage. There's an estimated, and yes, there are multiple studies, but the lower end of those studies is 96,000 housing units short of what we need across the state, rising up to 150,000. So we use the most conservative figure. So why is it so important to the economy? Our economy has not grown significantly. It's been stagnant since 2017. And we can't grow it without addressing housing costs and availability. State GDP represents that stagnation of our GDP represents billions of dollars in foregone economic activity and state revenues. The real estate sector in Maryland has underperformed the nation overall since 2017 to the tune of $12 billion. The construction sector has underperformed since 2017 to the tune of $4.2 billion. Statewide, we need that nearly 100,000 units to meet existing housing demand, but we need even more if we actually want to see growth. That doesn't even account for a growing population or a growing economy. That's just for the people who call Maryland home today. Maryland's housing undersupply is impacting our economic competitiveness. In fact, Maryland Department of Labor reports that only 33 workers are currently available in the state for every 100 open jobs, making it incredibly difficult for businesses to operate at full capacity or to grow in our state, to choose growth in Maryland. By increasing supply and being intentional about building near transit and job centers, we will be able to tackle housing affordability, make our economy competitive again, and retain our workforce in the state. In order for the economy to catch up, we've got to address this shortage. To be clear, increasing the availability of housing is essential for just ensuring that Maryland's economy operates at a fundamental functional level. We made a lot of strides last year with the historic housing package that was passed by the General Assembly. Aside from other things that we knew we needed to address around production and development, we also had an immediate challenge affecting Maryland families and their pocketbooks. That immediate challenge meant that we had to look out for vulnerable populations and give more people a pathway to home ownership, make it easier and more affordable for people to rent, make it easier for people coming out of homelessness to get into housing stability, It also created the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs within DHCD. That's a shop with, we're entrusted with 3 positions. 2 of them are operating. They have been hired, and a third is out there now. We're looking for a director. So feel free to share the resume, or excuse me, share resumes with me and share the job advertisement, which is on DHCD's homepage. It also empowered tenants to become homeowners by giving them the first statewide tenant opportunity to purchase in the nation, and if a landlord decides to sell their property. In addition to that, we passed the Housing and Community Development Financing Act, which among other things created that MCIC that I mentioned. And we passed, the General Assembly passed, and the governor signed into law, the Housing Expansion Affordability Act. And that creates new pathways for homes to be built on land that just makes sense. Nonprofit-owned land, former state-owned land, and land near transit. This year, the Housing for Jobs Act aims to release the most pronounced constraints on the state's economic growth by addressing the largest line item on Marylanders' budgets, their housing costs. The legislation seeks to tackle the housing affordability and supply crisis by setting housing production goals when there are too few homes in a region to support the available jobs. The goal of this proposal is to lower costs for Marylanders by cutting red tape while ensuring that the state retains and builds upon our strongest asset, that highly skilled workforce. Housing affordability tops the list as the #1 concern for Maryland voters, with nearly a quarter saying it is the biggest problem facing the state and biggest problem facing our state government today. That polling, by the way, was just released yesterday from the Maryland Association of Realtors. 1 in 3 Maryland families right now are cost burdened by their monthly rent or their mortgage payment. 53% of Maryland renters pay more than 30% of their income on rent. This means that there's less money for spending, less money for saving, less money for wealth creation, and our economy is showing that burden. Maryland currently ranks 43rd among states for housing affordability and 9th highest in total cost of living, the highest among states in the Mid-Atlantic region. This is driving migration out of the state, led by Marylanders aged 17 to 34. So led by the very core of our emerging workforce. They made up 65% of out-migration last year, with nearly 40,000 young Marylanders leaving the state, according to the U.S. Census. And the problem's only worsening. Polling shows that among those young renters and young homeowners who are choosing to leave the state, 42% of them say, and it's the #1 reason, that it's housing costs that are driving them out. 91% say having a full-time job but not being able to afford a home is a huge or significant obstacle to homeownership. These high housing costs are preventing our growth. Today, Maryland permits 39% fewer new housing units than it did before the 2008 recession. And this is in line with the state's underperformance, as I mentioned earlier, in the construction sector, where Maryland GDP growth is underperforming national GDP growth by 50%. Housing costs and commuting times are cited as #1 and #2 reasons young adults are leaving the state. And this is all the more reason why the Housing Expansion Affordability Act last year has applicability. So look, people are leaving, and Maryland's economy has been spinning its wheels because of the lack of affordable housing, and the lack of reliable transportation is constricting Maryland's workforce. 75% say there's too little housing at the start of their careers. So young people are recognizing that there isn't housing suited for the beginning of, or their first purchase or the beginning of their careers. 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom apartments, studio apartments. By increasing supply and being intentional about building near job centers, we'll be able to tackle housing affordability and start to get our economy competitive again. 63% of Maryland voters believe that excessive regulations make it too difficult to build affordable housing options. So we must identify local housing infrastructure gaps where communities are missing housing and address those gaps to increase affordability, expand opportunity, and stimulate economic growth. The Housing for Jobs Act will identify those jurisdictions with gaps, identified as those with more than 1.5 jobs per housing unit, as they have an obligation to approve new housing units unless there's a reason for denial that outweighs the community's need for housing. And the bill clearly articulates what those reasons would be. To be clear, increasing the availability of housing is an essential part of addressing affordability. Second, as we ramp up housing production, we want to ensure that Maryland cities and towns like Elkton, Cambridge, Salisbury, et cetera, are successful places where people can work and shop and raise their families. And that's where our place-based economic development tools come into place. We are all about investing in things that will produce tax revenue. I spoke to some of you earlier this month about the Project Restore legislation that would codify that program, that COVID era program to fill vacant storefronts on our main streets. In December, we also announced the state's revitalization program awards, and that included $9.5 million of funding that went to 49 projects on the Eastern Shore. Just some examples quickly are $300,000 for the completion of structural and exterior improvements to preserve the Henry Hotel in Ocean City, $120,000 for the redevelopment of a vacant historic bank building in Hillsborough into a market and cafe, and $225,000 for the abatement of lead paint in Elkton Armory's drill hall in Cecil County. Our projects produce $12 in direct state and local revenues for every dollar invested last year. And last year's funding round also produced $20 in economic impact for every dollar invested. I believe there's no better bang for the taxpayer's buck. We also continue to directly support the backbone of Maryland's economy, small businesses. We recently announced our Business Boost microgrant program. It provided $2.1 million to 47 small businesses up and down the Eastern Shore seeking to expand or establish locations and support economic growth. These businesses were awarded grants ranging from $20,000 to $50,000. They drive innovation and technology advancements. They started new industries in communities that weren't present there. They leveraged existing strengths. Many of them were women-owned businesses, veteran-owned, and minority-owned businesses. We also provided $33.9 million in financing as a complement to that. So we're a lending institution that does a significant amount of work with small businesses through our Neighborhood Business Works initiative. Our Neighborhood Revitalization Division is a dedicated partner. We work with our core communities, our Main Street groups, arts organizations, downtown groups, et cetera. And their broad range of grant and loan and technical assistance programs have been helping Maryland's Main Street communities thrive for many years. For many years. We're also spending more time every day responding right now to and addressing the immense fiscal challenges that are emerging from Washington. We've got a lot of uncertainty at the federal level. I'm happy to talk about some details around that, but it's more important than ever that DHCD continues to strengthen the tools that we have available, strengthen our ties with local government, our partnerships in the nonprofit sector, and ensure that we are ready and prepared to weather any storm. I think if there's a lesson to be learned from the last couple of weeks, it's that if we want our communities to be successful, they've got to be able to rely on us, and we've got to be able to rely on them. So I want to close by just saying thank you. No matter what those storms we face, we'll continue to be here to help support Eastern Shore communities and Maryland communities writ large. So I am happy, Mr. Chair, to answer any questions that anyone has, and thank you again for your hospitality.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and appreciate the comments and the presentation today. Delegate Aaron's.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Secretary. It's good to see you. I want to focus a little bit on affordable housing, and I appreciate it, but it's very, very difficult when we're in our committees and we're listening to the policies that we're going through right now. It's noble to sit back and say we want to help people afford a home, but when you're looking at energy costs that are going through the roof, when you're looking at the 340 plus taxes and fee increases, the pounding that the citizens are getting as far as trying to accommodate the rental market, the cost to build a home, the supply mechanisms, these things make the talk about affordable homes. It's kind of irrelevant because there is no way to build an affordable home without affecting a whole lot of other people and continuing to have the policies that we're pushing forward. I don't understand how, people were complaining last month they're getting electric bills that double and triple what they're in the past because of usage or whatever. But I think the policies need to change in order to give the people the dollars that they can actually afford these new homes. But you have to look at the whole picture here when we're putting all this
onus on businesses, small businesses, large businesses, whatever. I don't see any legislation coming in that is absolutely supporting the businesses that provide these services. And I'm kind of confused at what the real definition of affordable housing would be.
Well, Delegate, thank you so much for your question. Let me start with the end there. The definition of affordable housing is a fantastic question, and I think we could spend hours talking about it. What I think is a little different from what like the federal government thinks when they call something affordable housing. Typically, they're talking about income restricted at 60% AMI and below. But what you and I probably think of as affordable, it depends on the family, right? It depends on their household income, what they can afford, and the fact is, whether something is a subsidized low-income housing tax credit financed project, whether it's a luxury home, it is immensely expensive to build today what you could have built for a lot less a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And it just keeps getting more expensive. And the factors, I think you're right that we have to take a holistic view of the total capital costs of building anything. The factors that go into it are, interest rates, taxes, so the cost of money, right? The cost of government, the regulatory process, all the processes and red tape that exists around entitlements, particularly in Maryland, the cost of materials, supply chain, yes, the impact of tariffs. I text daily with contractors all over the state that are just absolutely scared to death of what's about to happen to steel prices in this country and wood lumber prices in this country. The impact of labor. I mean, look, I just talked to you for, I don't know, 10 minutes or so and mentioned several times labor. And I think we've actually got the Secretary of Labor here. The labor market in Maryland is in a very tough place in that we can't house the people who would work here to build our housing. Right. It's like we're in a catch-22. We're trapped in a vicious cycle. What I would say is that none of those things deserve to be ignored. So every single thing that I just mentioned and that you mentioned, Mr. Delegate, must be paid attention to. Some of those we can influence easily. Some of them we can't. I would point to the Housing for Jobs Act as a true severing of many of the regulatory obstacles in the very, very complex process that we have today to permit the construction of any housing, not just affordable housing. By the way, it doesn't treat something that is subsidized or affordable housing development any different from a market rate development. The reason being is all of the experts tell us one thing. They tell us one thing clearly, is that the most significant thing that we can do for the price of all housing is to build more of it at any price point. Now, that flies in the face of politics a little bit because the easy thing to do on politics would be to say, we're only going to build affordable housing. One, government can't afford that. By the way, the private sector doesn't produce that stuff without massive government subsidy.
With all due respect, I appreciate that, but you're talking about what ifs coming forward from you're talking about tariffs and whatever, and I appreciate it, but this isn't a problem that just started this week or since we got this president. This is something we've been fighting, and we continually pound business. And whether we like it or not, minimum wage is affecting this. Jobs are affecting this, and it's not something that just started today. This is something we've tried to do, and nobody's been able to address it. And I appreciate the comments on how we'll do it, but it comes down to every time you subsidize something, you're actually charging the taxpayers. And I think we fail to look at that because that now comes back on the people that have versus the people that don't have. And I think there needs to be a better approach. We need to start looking at these things and sit back. How are we going to do it without the politics that we're talking about right now? But I appreciate your comments. And I know there's no answer for this. I really believe that. That's why I asked the question.
Well, Delegate, I think there is an answer for this. There's great examples. We in a scatter plot map, and I wish I had it here, I could show you. There are housing markets where rents and home prices are declining, and they are also the fastest growing markets. The reason why those places are seeing declining rents and declining housing prices is because they massively cut the regulatory obstacles to producing. Labor is not any cheaper there. Materials not any cheaper there. finance isn't any cheaper there. The cost of borrowing money isn't any cheaper. The thing that they did is recognize the thing that they can control is the regulatory obstacles. Maryland has an opportunity to follow the lead of the places that have done it right. And I believe the Housing for Jobs Act will get us there.
I'm anxious to see that because I haven't seen it, but thank you very much for your time. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, that's okay.
Delegate Hartman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Secretary Day, for being here today. Tagging, I think Delegate Aaron somehow stole some of my notes that I had on my desk here. Do you have a camera in here? But sharing some of the sentiment with Delegate Aaron's, and I'm glad to hear that, you know, it was not too long ago the comptroller started recognizing the fact that we have a domestic migration problem out of the state. I think we're number 43 or 46 in the country. And now I'm finally glad to hear you talking about overregulation. You know, but it's a combination of things. The age group you mentioned is interesting because I also hear of some of the older people who are leaving because of our, you know, lack of, you know, it's just not affordable. Retiree tax and so forth just makes other places more appealing. So here that we're losing younger people as well is really concerning. But it's utilities that add to that. I know people paying as much in utilities as they are for their mortgage. So you identifying regulation as part of the problem, you know, are we pulling back anything that's adding to this? You know, I'm hearing, are you weighing in on bills that are going to compound our demand for electric right now? We're importing 40% of the electric. Cost of electric we know is going to go through the roof in years to come. Just not enough room on the grid, but yet we keep having policy that increases the demand. You know, there's a bill this year that's going to require a new house to be all electric with solar panels. And of course, we passed other policy that adds to the cost. What bills are you taking a position on to help the situation? And what policy are you looking at pulling back? What regulation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Delegate, I don't know that we've been asked to take a position on anything specifically related to energy generation or utility expenses, but we do always scan the environment for anything that would counteract the direction that we are trying to head. And yeah, that happens. I mean, obviously not all pieces of legislation generate from the administration and from the same minds. But we are always scanning the environment, as you know. On this call is our Chief Legislative Officer, Chuck Cook. So we're always monitoring what's happening in the world and the impact it'll have on housing costs. I mean, you can tell, I think, that I'm pretty focused on ensuring that affordability is the number one watchword of our agency. There's a lot of other things we're concerned about, believe me. You know, accessibility, addressing homelessness, in extending broadband to every location in the state, but affordability is word number one. So back to what regulatory obstacles are we addressing? So when we look at the entitlement process, and yes, you know, it's unique in every jurisdiction, and it's also unique in every type of development. So you're talking about a real spectrum of thousands of scenarios. And having run permitting before as a mayor at the local level, I can tell you every project is different. And so you've got so many steps that anything must go through. The model that we have adopted and proposed in Housing for Jobs Act takes an approach of, it's a minimalist approach. So it takes approach of rather than say what you cannot do, it says you have an affirmative responsibility if you have a housing infrastructure gap. You have an affirmative responsibility to approve a project, so long as it complies with objective development regulations, and so long as it doesn't do one of 6 good reasons that you can deny for. And objective development regulations, for example, would be like density. You know, a crystal clear number of how many units on a piece of property you can produce. Another one of those 6 reasons is conservation, either zoning, so ag zoning, or conserved land. You can't approve housing development that is not allowed kind of by right in those situations. That would also include, you know, sensitive ecological zoning and things like that. A third is water and sewer availability. Nowhere else in the state of Maryland is this as acute an issue as it is on the Eastern Shore for our very small towns. I've spent a lot of time talking to places like Mardell Springs that doesn't have a sewer plant, Hebron, Del Mar, places that are resource constrained and don't have the ability to provide those services. They shouldn't be asked to take on a burden that they can't respond to immediately, right? And even school overcrowding. So we worked with the IC to ensure that we are complying with state, clear state expectations with respect to school capacity. But beyond that very clear subset of good reasons that someone should be able to deny an otherwise perfectly legal housing development application, we need to remove all of the subjective process. And there are thousands of regulatory obstacles and rules and very clear, unclear subjective processes that development is put through. Last year, we took a bite at the apple trying to address the number of public hearings associated with any given project that any particular body had, just for that subset of projects that would be eligible under HEAA. This year, we take a much broader approach and just say, listen, you have a responsibility to address housing affordability by approving what comes across your desk when it objectively meets the law. And you cannot produce these long, arduous, bureaucratic-driven processes that are unrelated to, again, the letter of the law. And I think we'll see massive improvement. This is the New Jersey model. The Mount Laurel doctrine is the precedent for this. New Jersey has, fought this in the courts successfully to produce I think, a measured response. California is another place that's addressed this. Florida, Montana are on the cutting edge of this topic right now. And I think Maryland's going to be a leader as well.
But Secretary, I appreciate it at that level, but in a lot of our communities, especially the district I represent, there are individual lots and so forth that could be built that aren't being built. There's a lot of need for redevelopment and so forth. It's our policy. You said regulation. I was excited to hear that, but look down the weeds. I mean, in Maryland, we require that a home is over insulated, and then to make the home safe and healthy, you bring in fresh air, unconditioned air, because the home is over insulated. That's our policy. That's a huge expense. A home with a garage, we require that it has an EV circuit ran. And there's not necessarily a need for that. But usually the panel's in the garage, and that could be added at any time if and when an EV is going to be put in that garage. It's policy like that. Our building energy performance standards, it's policy like that that's chasing people from Maryland. And then I hear, which something I wasn't aware of, for our existing homeowners, if they have an oil-fired heating system by 2029, and tell me if this is, accurate or not, that they need to replace that, to something that other than the oil-fired source. So, those homes may need a new electric service to accommodate that. You're talking $30,000, $40,000 in some of these homes. That's the policy that's making housing unaffordable. Are we drifting away from any of these failed policies in the administration?
Yeah, Delegate, I think all is on the table for discussion. We've started meeting with agency partners to look at some of those obstacles that are self-inflicted, right? Obviously, there are multiple policy objectives that we have to meet simultaneously as a state. And I'm the Secretary of Housing. I don't get to decide all of those policies, but I'm at the table with my partners in the Department of the Environment, my partners in the Department of Transportation, and elsewhere to look at exactly what you're talking about. What is the totality, and Delegate Ahrens addressed this too, what is the totality of the self-inflicted regulatory obstacles to producing affordable, and again, to get back to Delegate Ahrens' point, affordable meaning affordable at multiple price points, right? Up and down the income spectrum for Maryland families, because the regulatory environment that we create has an immediate effect on price. It has an immediate effect on rent. It has an immediate effect on our economy because that affects what people have available to spend on other things. And what I can tell you is it is the subject matter that we have the most control over and the most influence over. Nobody on this call, I think, and if you do, please raise your hand and let me know, has the power to change the price of a piece of plywood or has the power to change the interest rates that we're all facing. But what we do have the ability to do is change the regulatory environment. I agree, and I acknowledge that that exists at both the state and the local level. And the Housing for Jobs Act, by the way, contemplates that not just local regulation, but state regulation is considered in the limitation, again, to those 6 reasons for which a project may be denied. So it puts on the table, the Housing for Jobs Act puts on the table all sorts of regulatory obstacles and regulations that have been adopted by state agencies, counties, and municipalities for discussion, consideration, and ultimately for consideration of being subordinated to the current immediate need of building affordable housing.
Okay, we are
Yeah, we
running
need to-
over time, and let me just say, we do want to hear from the Secretary of Labor, who I don't think we've heard from before during this 4-year term. We have 2 final questions, Secretary Day. This is a great presentation. Appreciate your answers. If we can make them brief, the last 2, Senator Mounts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very quickly, Secretary Day, good to see you. Thanks for your time. And we had a long conversation about housing. Don't want to get into all that. And I think your words self-inflicted is a shadow that nobody really wants to deal with. And I would just encourage you to encourage the governor to sort that out and end the self-infliction. You know, when you say Department of Environment and we talk about trying to keep prices down, again, that's a different story. You also mentioned homelessness, and homelessness is a serious issue everywhere. It's become more and more serious every year. I was contacted by a number of shelters prior to the session that were very concerned about potential legislation this session. Is there any legislation that you're aware of that's dealing with homeless shelters and how that legislation might affect homeless shelters, both big and small?
Yes, sir. So Senator, thanks for your question. Great to see you too. And I will just say that, you know, the reason why we are so focused on cutting regulatory obstacles is the governor's direction. So I understand those challenges exist across multiple parts of our policy landscape, the environment, transportation, but they all affect housing. So I hear you loud and clear. With respect to homeless shelter certification, yes, there is a piece of legislation similar to last year's, although it is one modified in response to a study that was conducted between last session and this. It is also modified now with amendments that MML and MACO proposed. And so the amended proposed version, you know, we accept gladly, and I think the sponsors have accepted the MML and MACO amendments. So what this does is acknowledges that we have a really uneven landscape of homeless shelter practices around the state, and that many people who are in the worst possible position are subject to some really unacceptable circumstances. I want to note that you know, this is kind of the last frontier of licensing in the state of Maryland. You know, we treat animal shelters to inspections and licensing and certification to make sure that animals aren't abused and mistreated, and we don't do the same for homeless persons. And I want to note that, you know, in my opinion, nobody's got a right to be in the housing business. We apply rules to everybody else in the housing business. Quality, safety, make sure people's health is protected. And it includes building safety, yes, but it's also about ensuring that all housing providers are providing housing in an emergency situation in a way that acknowledges the alternative. The alternative is people, you know, freezing outside. I want to be clear that I think a lot of the questions have come from our friends in the faith community, and there's no question in my mind, that a faith institution may practice anything about their faith any way they choose. But in this country, our tradition is that our churches, our synagogues, our temples, they open their doors and invite people in. And that's not what an emergency shelter is. It's an option. It's not an option. It's a last resort. And so to act as the only emergency housing provider in a given area and to give people the choice of either freezing to death or practicing a faith other than their own, I don't think that's exactly American or Christ-like, nor should it be legal. I want to note one of the big reasons that this has been a topic of discussion is that we see significant mismanagement in several shelters that do not accept any state or federal funding, and there are pretty extreme examples out there. And I don't want to get into which ones. We can talk about that offline, but some of those examples include unmistakable externalities based on the practices of those shelters, including shutting their doors during the day, leading to significant impacts on local public safety and health, burdens on local police departments and medical staff, small businesses, neighbors to shelters. And that shuttering of doors is just one of the practices that negative externalities are pushed out on communities and on the taxpayer without any acknowledgement or responsibility taken by shelter owners. So I think there's just some basic standards that we want to get into here. There's the legislation envisions a very long and collaborative process of correcting some of these practices. And I am confident that we are open to working with our shelter operators to get there. I understand not everybody's going to agree with me and not everybody's going to be happy about it, but I'm open to any dialogue with them to find out the right way to do it.
Thank you. That was much more than I needed for a response. Just real quickly, I don't think this is the last frontier. I think the government is ready to regulate the way we walk, the way we talk, and the way we breathe. So this is by no means the last frontier.
Fair enough.
Also, in our committee, we've had hearings on treatment centers where you've got treatment centers that have accepted money and totally ripped off the system, and worse, has done the people for the treatment centers wrongly. But besides the point, this homeless issue is a really important one. There's a council on homelessness, which I think you're familiar with, that covers the entire Eastern Shore. This legislation goes through. I'm told that we're going to lose some homeless shelters. That's pre-session, and I know bills change through session. If this is the direction you're going, I would just, this is going to be on the Moore administration, right? If this goes in, then we lose homeless shelters. I remember so well when we did the blueprint. Oh, all the daycare centers are going to be fine. This isn't going to affect daycare. It's going to help daycare. Well, what do we got? We've lost a lot of daycare centers after the blueprint went through. And I'm not making accusations. I'm not picking a fight. I'm not saying, anything. I just, the principle here is in the government, do no harm. That's what they say. Go to Annapolis, Johnny, and do no harm. And we've been informed that this is a problem for some of our homeless shelters. And if you could just keep that into consideration, share that with the principals that are involved with that, and let them know this isn't a power thing. It's as, we're making the most, a lot of these groups are making the most that they can with what little they have. And to the extent that there are problems, yeah, there are shades of gray everywhere. But if the legislation is going forward, there are some real serious concerns, and it's a really important thing. I appreciate that you know so much about it and that you're versed on it. I just encourage you as we go forward, if you could work with that council of homelessness on the Eastern Shore. I don't think they're trying to take any authority from the government, and I think they're trying to do the right thing. And with the right work, time, and patience, I think you can get to where you want to be. And I would urge you to go slowly, because they don't have HR departments. A lot of them do sacrifice a lot of their own time and money to provide this service. And I really appreciate that you're focused on it and concentrating on it. And I want you to know it's really important to me too. So if I can help you during the process, it's not in my committee, but feel free to reach out to our office to try to find ways to get workable solutions.
All right, we are truly out of time, and Secretary Wu is going to have 20 minutes to give presentation and answers. Secretary Day, last word, and then we appreciate your time today.
I just want to say, yeah, Senator Mouse, hear you loud and clear. I don't want to see a single shelter close. 100% understand, appreciate your position there. Happy to work with you and work with the council on that. And ultimately, I don't think a soul has gotten into the business of providing homeless shelter for nefarious reasons. I think they're all in it for the right reasons. It's just a matter of ensuring that it's done in the best way to protect those vulnerable people that are in need of emergency shelter. So I will gladly work with you in your office.
Okay, thank you very much, Secretary Day.
And Senator Carrozza, I'll reach out to you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. All right, so next we have I'm a fan, Secretary Wu. Department of Labor is near and dear to my heart. We are well over time. We have roughly 20 minutes for the presentation, and we're excited to have you. I am for sure, and the floor is yours. And thank you so much for your patience.
Thank you, Delegate, for having me. For those of you I haven't met, I'm Portia Wu. I am short, like physically in stature, and I will be short today on this call because I know you've been listening for a long time. I had a couple things I wanted to touch on super quickly. I won't belabor this first point, but of course, Department of Labor is always here to be of service to you and your constituents. We have, I want to say in last year, we served, nearly 4,000 people on the Eastern Shore with workforce services, through working with our local workforce partners. We have a dozen earned grants, working with industry to help people get skills in in-demand fields. And, we want to continue to do that. Also, labor dollars, many of us still think of it, it has a wide remit. And so, for example, the last conversation, we do have building codes in our department. So if there are ways we can engage on any of these issues, look forward to talking with you about that. I want to spend a minute actually on federal government transition and impacts. This is something you all heard Governor Moore talking about, the twin storms. At the Department of Labor, we are very focused on what does this mean for Maryland's economy. You've probably seen a lot of numbers thrown around, but there are over 300,000 Marylanders who live in Maryland and work in federal government service, civilian side. There are over 160,000 federal government civilian positions located in Maryland. So sometimes you hear those different numbers and it's a little confusing. It's because about where they're located versus where people are living. And then there are about 200-some thousand individuals who we know are working on federal contracts across the state. I did a little bit more of a breakdown looking at the Eastern Shore. We have, and again, these are estimates, they're surveys, they're not exact, but just gives us a sense of the magnitude. About 9,000 individuals living on the Eastern Shore who are federal employees, and roughly 4,000 federal civilian jobs located on the Eastern Shore that we're aware of. So, and then about $750 million in federal contract spend. That's from the 2023 data that we're aware of, direct contract spend. And of course, there are ripple effects going out, right? There are grants, there are other things. Obviously, to the extent federal funding is impacted, that freezes funding at the state agency. That has an impact for local agencies that are providing services and benefits in your communities. So we're keeping a very close eye on this, sync with the governor's office twice a week. We have a regular meeting with the county execs and their staffs. My team also meets every single week with the local workforce areas. But I wanted to make you aware of, and we will send an email around to the delegation with all of these links. First of all, people apply for unemployment insurance at their duty station. So if you live in Maryland, but you work in DC or Virginia, you apply in those jurisdictions. We haven't seen sort of big waves of applications yet, but we know it could come. And I want to assure you, we are gearing up to be prepared to serve your constituents. I'll be honest, our unemployment insurance system has not always provided the best service, and we still have a long ways to go in terms of improving. I think our experience in responding to the Francis Scott Key Bridge emergency showed that we can do this. We can move quickly, and that being in person and really coming to people and providing that service is what people want and Marylanders deserve and should expect. So that is something I have been turning around. We went sort of all remote before and let's use apps. That does not work for everybody. So even before this happened, we stood up in a couple job centers. We're going to be doing this more, is putting people there in person to be able to answer people's questions, right? Especially for people who aren't as tech savvy. And frankly, our tools are not the best. That's what we should do to be responsive. So I'm going to pause there. I have a couple pieces of legislation I wanted to talk about, but I know the federal transition is top of mind for everyone. Again, we will be sending out those resources. You can take a look at the Department of Labor's website, labor.maryland.gov/federal workers. And it talks about that. We're having weekly workshops, like reemployment workshops every Wednesday. We've already had 2. It's a 3-hour-long workshop. A lot of folks have been in federal government for a while. Maybe they're nervous about transitioning, doing a lot of intensive work with folks to help them feel like they have all the options. And we're also very open to talking about how we can do job fairs. We still have needs in state and county and local government. How can we make sure, and our employers, private sector employers have needs too. How can we make sure to help people transition if they need to? Of course, we don't know exactly what will happen, but we want to be prepared.
Would you like to go ahead and just complete your?
Okay, I'll barrel through.
We'll have time for questions, but normally that's fine.
Okay, just do it at the end. Sounds good. I want to touch on 3 pieces of legislation. First of all, on family and medical leave. Many of you may have seen the story this morning. The department has announced that we are looking to delay implementation of that program by 18 months. Of course, I've been in touch with Senator Hershey. I know he has legislation on this point too. It's due to a number of reasons, but principally we see what we're facing in the state. We understand these are, colossal impacts for businesses and workers. It's a very turbulent time. We felt it was more prudent to provide more time for implementation. Honestly, we also are a little, it's taken us more time to get ready than I think we would have anticipated. Obviously, as you're building it, you learn more things. So that is part of it. And there have been a number of things that have happened over the last year or 2 that have already caused delays. So the real purpose of this was to make sure that we can responsibly implement the program and do a good job doing so and manage the impacts as we're going through this very difficult time. 2 other pieces of legislation I wanted to flag are, first of all, the RAISE Act. I forget what the acronym stands for, but it's about registered apprenticeship. And that is part of the governor's package. This establishes, a more dedicated office in the department. I think we all know apprenticeship is a really excellent opportunity, creates another pathway for individuals. Sometimes it can be incorporated with college. Sometimes it's an alternative to college. I personally am very passionate also about expanding apprenticeship beyond the skilled trades, even though there's a very important, strong foundation there, to look at other areas like nursing, teaching, cybersecurity, and IT. We have a lot of needs there. Thousands of jobs that are going unfilled in our state. They pay really good wages. We need to help more Marylanders get on those paths. So that's going to be a big focus. And of course, we have a number of partnerships, including with Warwick Community College, with some of the, plumbing and other companies on the shore. Like, we're really excited about that work and continue to expand it and to use dedicated purpose account funding that was already previously allocated by the General Assembly to support these efforts. So there's not a budget ask in that piece. Another piece of legislation I wanted to draw your attention to is regarding the Cyber Maryland program. Many of you may know this was stood up a few years ago as part of TEDCO. The idea is to really develop a comprehensive cybersecurity workforce strategy. We have several thousand unfilled cyber jobs open in the state at any given time. I want to say the median cyber wage in Maryland is $137,000. These are really good paying jobs with NSA, with all of the resources we have in the state. We really can and should be the leaders in cybersecurity in our region, if not in the nation. But we haven't had the sort of coordinated investments in workforce we need to. So we do have an ask in the budget about this to significantly increase this. with Director Coker coming from the National Cyber Director Office, to move on into take over Department of Commerce. We feel this is the time to really double down on some of these national security and cyber and IT roles and really help Maryland lead the pack on this. So, it transfers the bill, and, I'll wrap up here. It transfers the bill from the agency, from TEDCO, the program, to us at Department of Labor, and really starts funding it to provide workforce programming. TEDCO was sort of the incubator phase, doing the analysis, the research. We're actually issuing a report, which we will send to you next week, that we spent 6 months doing really in-depth analysis. You can see all the breakouts of the different roles. But that is one bill I also wanted to call your attention to. Really excited about that. So I'll stop there. Happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you, Secretary Wu. I'm going to give a few minutes, see if there's any questions. I would like to, okay, there we go. Senator Croza. And Senator, sorry about the other one. We were going way over time, and I
No,
really
that's
want to
fine. I'll follow up with the secretary on those amendments to make sure they impact and address the concerns of the faith-based homeless shelters. But I wanted to make sure, Madam Secretary Wu, thank you for the
Nice to see you.
presentation. And I just wanted to let you know, I've been working with some of your team with the work that we've been doing on the Apprenticeship 2030 Commission. And I have partnered with Delegate Wu on the House side on a apprenticeship tax credit bill that would actually extend the apprenticeship tax credit since it's due to sunset. And that bill hearing is on February 20th.
Okay.
And I just wanted to alert to you the importance of this. And if we're going to be successful in increasing the number of apprenticeships and apprentices across the state, we have to have incentives for the employers to do so. And here we actually have, a program to incentivize employers. But back in 2020, when a change was made with a wage requirement, it actually, we had small businesses that were then not able, and also some unions that were not able to take advantage of the apprenticeship tax credit, which is on the books for those very organizations that invest in apprenticeships. So again, I wanted to let you know, some of your team has been involved in that, providing us the information, because we saw the dramatic decline of the number of employers decrease when that new requirement went into place in 2020. Now we have these goals of increasing apprenticeships across the state tied to the blueprint as well. And yet we have an incentive program that's not working. So not only does it, number one, it needs to be extended because it's set to sunset, but then we also need to fix this wage requirement piece. So I wanted to bring it to your attention at a leadership level, to let you know we need these type of incentives if we're to have employers participate in these apprenticeship programs.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate that. I completely agree. We need to figure out a way to get more, these apprenticeships don't work if employers don't participate. There's no such thing. So 2 key things in the bill, when we do mention an apprenticeship incentive program, we should talk more about whether the right structure is a tax credit or something maybe more direct, because I know tax credits can have their own, complications for employers, but absolutely we want to make sure that we have those incentives, and completely agree, not only incentives, but establishing some sort of industry intermediaries, because especially for smaller businesses, they can't, they don't have a dedicated HR person. They can't set up an apprenticeship program. They want something that's a little more plug and play, an opportunity for them to go somewhere, get the talent and say, oh, I can participate in the structure that already exists, and that can help me source talent for my growing business. So
And
absolutely
I appreciate
engage
that,
with
but
you.
I just do want to underscore, sometimes these other incentives, they take a while to get through, the legislative process. We don't, right now, we have a tool that is about to expire, and that we need to make a little fix to make sure more employers can take advantage of it. So we have something right now that we would want to continue because these other incentives are not in place yet. So that's why there is a sense of urgency with this session, with this bill.
Absolutely. Thank you, Senator. We'll be happy to engage with you on that.
Okay, Secretary, I just want to make a brief statement, and I think you'll agree with most of the statement, but it doesn't really require a response. You know, as an employer in the state, not only do I respect the department, you're a strong regulatory department with Commissioner Burke and the Commissioner of Labor and Industry. We are tracking a bill that the Attorney General has put in, and I am concerned because as an employer, we like clarity. If there's violations under the law, coming into compliance is important. We respect wage and hour laws, the enforcement provisions that the department has. When we see the Attorney General bringing the bill in, I worry that it creates a bifurcated or a dual enforcement mechanism that will confuse and complicate the relationship that businesses have with the Department of Labor. When we count on the Department of Labor to signal to the private sector and to the business community what the rules and responsibilities are, at the same time, we're listening to a bill that may very well pass. I don't know whether it will or won't. I believe my testimony on this particular matter is I'd much prefer to continue to count on the Department of Labor and its strong enforcement to create fair workplace practices, worker safety. I trust and believe in your department to do such things. And the statement I'm making is because I think a bill's coming in that's going to make it difficult for businesses to feel confident in the marketplace, workplace, as we're trying to do work. And that's a statement. You don't need to respond to that, but I'll give you the closing notes. The bell have rung and we're going to have to part ways. So
thank you, Delegate. Yes, we are aware of the Attorney General's bill. I think you have some very perceptive comments about it. I will note that as part of the governor's procurement package, we had worked on some language about trying to create sort of like, their carrots and sticks, like carrots, like incentives for contractors that wanted to voluntarily talk about how they were complying with, the best and highest labor standards. I think we've run into some concerns with that approach. Maybe they're more technical, but I completely understand. We all want to incentivize businesses to do the right thing. We want to support businesses that are doing well and doing right by their workers and complying with the law. But, there are a lot of specifics and certain, provisions may have very wide reaching consequences. So happy to work with you further on that. Thank you for the complimentary words about the department. I just want to say that, and we will be issuing the Joint Enforcement Task Force report. It was due at the end of the year, but it was a little late with everything going on, but that will be coming out in the next week or two. Happy to share that around. We do find significant misclassification in some areas, and that's something that needs to be addressed. I just want to close by saying, I know I wasn't able to make it and join you last year, but I'm really excited to talk with the delegation, spend more time in your districts. If there's anything I can do to be supportive, obviously this is a very uncertain time and some untested waters for all of us. But we have some dedicated links. We have staff that are focusing on the response. Obviously for the shore, the numbers may not be as high of federal employees as in some counties, but nonetheless, it's still a significant economic impact for our state. And we want to do whatever we can to be helpful. So please don't hesitate to reach out at any time to me or anyone on my staff.
thank you very much, Secretary.
Thank you.
Federal update's going to be about 30 seconds. We've got the bells ringing over here in Annapolis. So I see Congressman Andy Harris's office.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'll keep it short and sweet. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers expected to begin dredging operations in Ocean City on or about February 25th. So that's exciting news. Congressman had a roundtable briefing on HPAI, avian flu, which included officials from Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service and Agricultural Research Service. There's some expansion of a rule to audit areas under Biden for requirements for areas outside of a control zone, which is a zone where flocks are infected. Finalizing the rule was rushed. They didn't account for enough APHIS inspectors to do audits in a timely manner, which put farmers in financial risk. So they're working with state environment departments and training new inspectors and hope to have the issue resolved shortly. So There's supposed to be a House Budget Committee meeting that will advance budget resolution out of committee today, setting up a potential floor vote when Congress returns from recess the week of February 24th. So I'll just leave it at that. Anything you guys need, reach out to our office. Pleasure to work with you.
Okay, members, I'm going to have to go ahead and call for a close to the meeting. Could I get a motion to adjourn? A second. Looking at you, Johnny Mouse. I need your help, buddy.
Second.
All right. Thank you very much. Everyone have a good day.